game devs. We're going to talk about how Unity works and getting an overview of Unity, as well as if you have a project using GitHub and Git LFS, we're going to set that up as well. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that I have Unity installed. The Unity that we're going to be running and the one that I'm running today is 2019.2.17 F1. So you should check your syllabi and make sure that that is still the correct one for you to install. Otherwise, go and download the one that is on the syllabi. These little icons here are the build support. Typically, I like to install Android, iOS, Mac, WebGL, and Windows. If you go to this add button in Unity Hub, which you should download from the website unity.com, you can see that there's a couple different selections. These ones are the latest official releases. The ones with LTS means long-term support. So those ones are going to be the longest lasting engines. You can also look at their alphas and betas and stuff, so other stuff. So if you hit, I'm just going to show you the next menu, but I've already installed 2019.2.17. So this menu, you can add which modules to install. You're going to want to also install Microsoft Visual Studio, whatever the most up-to-date one is. I keep my Microsoft Visual Studio up-to-date separately from Unity, and I download it from their website. I also do some augmented reality. Vuforia is the augmented reality support. So if you want that, but you can just check off whatever it is you want. Sometimes people's hard drives are small and you want to do everything. That's fine. But at least WebGL and PC, those are the two standard ones that we need. So I'm just going to hit cancel here just because I already installed it. So the other thing I already have ready to go is GitHub. So let's go over to github.uconn.edu, and we're going to go to repositories, and we're going to create a new repository. And this is just going to be, you can put whatever name you want there if you're making a project. This is just going to be a demo for me. I'm going to make a private repository so no one can see my files. This is pretty important when you're working in Unity files, that you're not inadvertently sharing other people's code and assets. Like if you're downloading Corgi 2D, you don't want to just inadvertently publish that online, right? So you want to use a private server for anything like that. And then you want to initialize this repository with a README. I usually do that. And then see this add.gitignore. So the way Git works is that it will upload anything inside of the folder that is in our here, we'll just go to show and explore. So anything that we change in for this one, but anything in these folders here will update. But Unity creates a lot of files. They're called meta files typically, but there's a bunch of other things in there that we just don't want to upload, like where all of the UI preferences are, like whether or not what kind of color scheme you have, that kind of thing. So adding a gitignore, you can see that there's tons of different kinds. We can just go to Unity. And a gitignore allows the server to ignore certain files that aren't important to the game that allow us to then share back and forth. So we're going to create repository. And now I've got a gitignore and I've got a README. So we have to do something else, let's clone our repository. So to do that, we're going to go to GitHub desktop. And because I have, we're going to go add clone repository because the repository exists already. And we're going to go to enterprise server. And I'm going to just search for demo 2020. Might need to refresh a little. There we go. And I'm going to select that one. And I am going to hit clone. And then we're cloning the server. So it's just downloading the README, which is empty. And it's created, see that demo spring 2020. It's created the README, and this is the gitignore file. Don't change that at all, but we can open this up. One file, I use Notepad++ a lot, if you like that, but as you can see, it's got some information here. So what it's saying is what folders to ignore, and then also ignore things with the extension CS project, Unity project.sln, some other things, user preferences. So they're trying to help make sure that we don't upload the wrong files. So this is really helpful. Now, here's one extra step that we need to do because we're using Unity with Git. So Git is kind of a weird system, and it doesn't really do big files well, like we were saying. So Git LFS is our service that we want to run. So we want to download this, and I've already done that. Git LFS. Oops. See, I've already downloaded that, and I've hit install. And then once we've done that, once we've downloaded it onto our computer, we're going to go, and I'm going to put this side by side with my repository here. Git desktop. And we're going to go to repository, open in command prompt. This is the only time we're going to have to do this for the most part, but this is just a really fast way to get to the correct repository after we've cloned it. So we want to install Git LFS. You have to do it for every single service that you're going to do. Git LFS install. So we're just going to type that in, just like they say right here in the instructions. And then it says updated Git hooks, Git LFS initialized. And then we're going to create a Git LFS track. So this is saying track Photoshop files and don't upload them. So we're just going to create an initial one, and we're going to follow along because we don't want Photoshop files on there anyway. Git LFS track quotes star period PSD end quote tracking PSD. So we could do this individually line by line, but there's an easy copy paste that we're going to get to in a second. So we want to make sure that Git attributes is tracked. Git add dot Git attributes. That won't do anything. And now that you're done, that's it. It's set up. So let's get all of the information into the Git LFS. We're going to close this command prompt. And if we take a look at that. A second file has been created. Let's open up this file. Edit with Notepad. And you want to open it in Notepad, not Word, by the way. Notepad or Notepad++ is what I use. But these files, Word and other systems like it will add extra stuff into your file. And you really, really don't want that. You want this to be a text file. And to do that, you need to edit it through it. So see this PSD filter, LFS, diff, LFS, all this stuff. This says, hey, ignore any Photoshop files that or not ignore, add the Photoshop file to the large file storage because Photoshop files are never small. And if it's over 50 megabytes, GitHub will just not accept it unless you have Git LFS set up. So we need to do a little bit more. I also have available to you, and it'll be in a link. So I have this document, Git LFS attributes. Don't grab this. In fact, I'll delete it right now. I'm gonna, and what we want to do is copy paste everything in this file, which just has a bunch of different things, image, JPEGs, audio, blah, blah, blah. It's just a standard one. You may find that it's not complete. So if you have a file that you're creating, you might need it. And I'm just gonna copy paste this all in, paste, save. And, oh, whoops, looks like I'm missing a hashtag. so copy paste all of this right in, and then save it, and make sure it saves as the same file right there. Now we're going to be able to ignore anything that we don't need on the server. And that's really important because now we're going to set up the project. All right. So within here, we've got these files. I like to put the project inside of another folder. So create a new file in your folder in your GitHub project. And we're going to call this my game. So it's a very unique term. So this is where we're going to create our Unity project. So we needed to set all of that up before we even started opening Unity. So let's go to Unity. I'm going to select 2019. I'm going to go projects. I'm going to say new project, 2019 to 17. And I'm going to create a 3D project. There's a bunch of different templates here. You can ignore them all for now, but 3D, just a regular 3D template. We're not going to do too much in our new game, but we're going to just put some a little FPS character controller in, maybe something to move around the scene. But yeah, so we're going to call this my project or my game. And we're going to navigate to the correct project in GitHub, my game. And we're going to put it here, select folder, and then create. So now Unity is going to auto-generate a bunch of different files. And here we go. Here is Unity. It may look a little bit different from yours. We'll go through everything in a second, but I just wanted to point out, now that we have Unity open, let's go to GitHub Desktop. We've got all these files that are added to the scene, or not to the scene, to the folder of GitHub. Now, later on, we can check this in, or we could check this in right now just to see, to make sure that we're getting things started. So we could say initialized the project. I think I spelled that wrong. Yeah, I did. There's no spell check in the comment section, so be careful if you care about your spelling, which you should. So we're just going to commit everything. And then we're going to push to origin. And that should work. And I'm just going to hop on to GitHub just to double check that all of these things went up. So I'm going to hit refresh on my server. Hey, look at that. My game. All of these files. Awesome. So this is Unity. So it's up on our server. If you have collaborators, so this is the way I'm going to expect you to maintain your own project files in a private server. I expect you to maintain these files because I don't take the excuse in this class, because we have this service, I don't take the excuse that your dog ate your homework or your computer exploded, because we can always back up to GitHub. When I work on projects, I usually check all my work in at the end of my work session, if that's the end of the day or end of a couple hours. I'll always check all my work into the server. The other thing I will also do is I will never break the game so that other people who are working on it will be able to download my updates, but then won't have to fix something in order to do that, to make it work again. And we'll cover that more in the future as to how you can break the game. But Unity will tell you. So it's very obvious because the play button won't work. So if the play button doesn't work, don't check it in. But try to update your work as often as possible. This has helped numerous students and has also been something that I have pointed to some students who have regrettably not utilized the software available to us. And they have lost their projects because, things happen. Sometimes Unity, you just need to reinstall it, or you just need to get a fresh install of your project because something went wrong. This happens a lot. Unity crashes. it's a game development tool. It's cutting edge software, and it'll crash occasionally. So it's pretty good, by the way, but comparative to like in-house studio tools. But things happen. All right, so let's get to Unity. So let me go set my Windows to layouts default. All right, so this is the default Unity layout window. You can resize any of these windows at any time, move them around. I'll tell you what everyone does, and we'll go through each one. But I just wanted to point that out. So this window here is the scene window. It's the visual representation of the game world. If I want to navigate in here, and this is where the 3-button mouse requirement comes in, I can navigate around visually by holding down certain buttons and flying around the scene. So the first thing I can do is hold down right click. And as you can see up in the top left here, my little icons here will change when I'm using different buttons. But when I right click, it allows me to look up and down, right and left, and all around. If you notice up here in the top right, this is our up, down, left, right grid, just X, Y, and Z. Same like if you were doing math. And if you thought that math wasn't important before, math is going to be very important in game development. So if you ever heard anyone in high school say, "Oh, but when will we ever learn or use this?" Well, we use math a lot, even as game developers, not programmers. So we can move around the scene. We can also hold down the middle mouse button to pan around the scene like that. And then we can also fly around the scene by holding down the right mouse button and using the WASD, and you can fly around like you would in a spectator mode in Counter-Strike or anything like that. This is the way I normally move around the scene the most. That being said, there's a couple other ways to move about. The other thing you can do is use the mouse wheel to zoom around. So in order to do this, I need to create an object that's like a standard default object so that we can have some perspective, so that you can kind of understand what I'm about to explain. So I'm going to go to Game Object, and I'm going to go to 3D Object, and I'm going to create a cube. Bam. Look at that. A cube appears. All right. All right. So if I move around, I can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out on an object. This may give you some weird peculiarities when you're moving around in the world because of the distance of the camera to the object. I generally try to stay away from the mouse wheel, but I know some people live by it. So if you're finding that like, oh, you're really way out here and like you can't find anything, what are you supposed to do? Well, you can select an object. There is the hierarchy, which is a list of all the things. Right now, there's only 3 things: a camera, a light, and a cube that we created. And I'm just going to select that cube. And then I can, with my mouse over the scene view, if I hit F, standing for focus, it'll zoom in on the object. So now I can fly around and just go straight to that. I could also go to the main camera. I also go to the directional light there. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but on the right-hand side, there's this thing called the inspector. The inspector is giving us information on each of the objects that we have. Each object has different information, but all of them have a transform, which is position, rotation, and scale. So if I wanted to make this cube bigger, I could change the numbers here and make the scale different. We're gonna mess around with this a little bit later when we create our little FPS demo. So from here, we can also see the game window. And the game window is a little bit different. See how it's straight on? The game window is representative of this camera. And the camera preview in this area points out that right now the camera is only looking to the right because we aren't telling the camera move around when the player moves around. There's no code here yet to drive the camera to do anything. So if we press play, this play button here will allow us to play our game in the editor. And there we go. We have a cube, and we can look at it. If this is not art, I do not know what is. If we press play again, it'll stop. This is the pause button. We're not going to use it right away, but it allows us to pause the action in order to jump over into the scene view. And we can actually move stuff around at the same time and unpause it. So if we wanted to, we can do that. There's also the asset store. We're going to look at that later, but this is definitely useful to poke around in. You know, take a look. There's often sales. All right. So in the bottom here, we've got project and console. So in our project, we have assets and scenes, and this is the sample scene. Think of scenes as levels. So we are already in the sample scene, and we can save if we wanted to because we added a cube. But this is where we're going to add folders. Typically when we have you create games, I'm going to ask you to create folders with an underscore underneath them. Because the folders that you create, you want to be able to organize them so that they are not interfering with any of the plugins that you're using. So I often will create a new scenes folder called underscore scenes. And, you know, I might leave this here. I might delete it. It depends. You could just rename this folder if you like. Maybe we'll do that. But I put an underscore scenes because that way it'll organize everything to the top. And, you know, that's just a little trick that'll help you out a lot later. So if we wanted to create another scene, for instance, we could say File, Save As, Scenes, Sample Scene, Test Scene 01. So now we have two levels, and just to create a differentiation between the two, let's change this cube. We can delete it. We can delete it. And let's just create, you know, a different game object. Let's create a capsule. We'll scale that up by using the manipulation buttons. We can, which is Q, W, E, R for hand, move, rotate, and scale. All right. So each arm here will allow us to scale in one direction or another. And the gray box in the middle will allow you to scale everything at the same time. If we're using the E command, the rotate, we can use, again, the gray command. The gray circle will allow you to rotate freely. Blue, red, and green lines will allow you to rotate in one specific direction. You can see these are updated here. And if you wanted to, you could just merely move things around this way, you know, via the numbers. Everyone's a little bit different in terms of the way they like to work. So, you know, there's no judgment. It's just whatever you like to do. But you can move it around that way. And if we hit the W key, we can get the mover arms, and then we can move it up and down, back and forth, the other Z direction. And do you see these little squares? This allows us to move it around in one plane, which is really helpful for when you want stuff to stay on the ground and you don't want it to lift up or whatever. It's very helpful in those cases. So, you know, this is now definitely a work of art. But yeah, we'll leave that there for now. And we can also investigate the things that it has. So we see it has a mesh renderer. And so if I uncheck it, that means that the mesh, the visual representation of the item is turned off. But you see those little green lines? Those are called colliders or collision. So collision and the visuals are different. If you think about like World of Warcraft or any 3D game, the the characters that you have running around, when they hit a wall, do they really touch every single part of the wall, or do they merely kind of collide into an invisible barrier that's near it? So because computers are really hard to program to do every single calculation, that would be very taxing on the CPU. We simplify all of the geometry, all of the 3D modeling stuff. We simplify it into smaller squares and circles and other shapes like that, or just simpler geometry that's just lower polygons. Because we can't render and collide with 10,000 polygons per character. It's just too much to run all those efficiently. So there's a visual thing, and then there's the thing that you collide with. So we could also turn this off, and then we won't collide with it, and we'll walk right through it. But now we will not, because there's a collider on it. We also have in the bottom here console, and this is where we're going to see errors if there are any in the game. All right, so the other tools we have up here is this, the global tool hand rotation. This is the most useful thing. When it goes to global to local, you could move the object along the local axis, as in the up of this object, versus the world up. So if you wanted to angle something and then like make sure that it goes exactly straight along that line, you can do that in local, then move around the global handles. In our scene view, we have shaded. We can also change this to wireframe or anything else if we're looking at stuff. We're not going to touch a lot of this right now, but there's different modes. Keep it on shaded for now. This is the 2D button. Keep it off, but if you accidentally press it, like, it's not the end of the world, but just so you know, it's right there. It switches this to 2D mode so that you can edit from the side. This is when scene lighting is on or off. Keep it on for now if it's bogging down stuff. Toggling audio, skybox, and other things. There's a couple things in here that you can turn on and off. And if we go to the game window, we have a couple other drop downs. We have display. We have free aspect. So if you want to make sure that you're at a specific like widescreen mode or whatever, I usually keep it on free aspect, or I use standalone mode. We've got the scale. This is just the scale of the window. And then we've got maximize on play. Some people like to hit this so that when you press play, it does full screen mode automatically. It's not my cup of tea. I like watching the game. I like docking my windows side by side and then playing the game from over here and watching from the scene. But it's whatever you want to do. And as you can see, I can kind of grab these windows and move them around. I generally like to keep my hierarchy on kind of like the bottom right or kind of at this bottom area so that it gives me more screen real estate. I try to get really, as big as I can. If you have access to a second monitors are at least a 30% up in your productivity, because every video game developer should have a second monitor. It's a real shame that developing on laptops can be a little bit clunky. And so if you have access to a second monitor, take advantage of it. And you can grab these windows. You can create duplicates of these as well. You can make 2 game windows or 2 scene windows if you're looking at specific stuff. You can grab it and move it onto the other onto the other monitor and work from there. It gives a lot of extra room. So I usually move stuff around a little bit, as needed, and trying to give myself as much real estate as possible. Here's Collab. Do not use Collab. You could pay for it, but GitHub is a much better tool. Even though there's more work that's to be done, this is a lot more click and click. The Collaborate is not exactly prime time ready, and it doesn't do some of the things that is really valuable from a perspective of GitHub. Also, it's really hard for me to interact without you having to pay for a seat for me to be on your service as well. So, that can be really frustrating. So just, ignore it for now, but just know you can do it with your own projects. And then your account, you need to sign into your account at all times because it's how it checks. We also have layers and what's visible in the scene. So, everything's visible by default, but just like in Photoshop, we can create layers in Unity, and then we can use code to access different layers. As you can see here, this capsule is on layer default, but we could add more if we wanted to. It could be really useful later on. This is also where we have our layouts. So 2x3, 4 split, default tall, wide. You can do whatever you want. You might also notice that my interface is dark. Yours might be light. That's normal. It's just the different versions of Unity. I have a different Unity Plus subscription. So it just looks a little bit different color-wise. Yeah, so this is Unity in a nutshell. That's about all we have in terms of interface. If you have any questions, let me know. Create a project in Unity, upload it to GitHub, and make sure that you can interact with Unity and GitHub, and make sure that those files get up on the server. That can be part of the challenge as well. So I'm going to do a couple things. So I'm going to hit save because we love saving, and Unity doesn't automatically save. So be careful. And I'm going to create one more folder, and I'm going to show you the power of Unity and or all video games. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call _prefabs. So a prefab is a prefabrication is like a template object. Now in video games, the thing that's really powerful, and you've seen this too, is when you're playing a game and you're shooting enemies, all of the enemies are generally like the same model or the same set of 3 or 4 models, or maybe it's a combination of stuff. So we can create prefabs, which are like a template object for us to implement in the scene. And then, if we have code, we could change stuff up, like how much health it has could be different for each level, but we don't need to code all of that. We can just create a prefab object. So to do that, I've got my capsule over here, and I'm just going to drag this into the prefabs folder. And now we've got a capsule prefab. Now you've noticed this color. It's now blue. So if you ever see blue stuff, that means it's a prefab object. And you can drag more capsules into the scene. Isn't that beautiful? And, what if, maybe I want to scale this one, right? Well, that's okay. They can independently be scaled, or all of the things that are in their data set, they could have differences in them. But we can always set it back to the original prefab if we wanted to. So we could revert all. Or maybe we actually like this new flat conical thing, right? I like that. Maybe I like that a lot. Maybe I want to rotate it as well. And then I can select this object and I can apply it all to the other capsules in the scene, and then they will maintain their orientation, but they'll change the object. So this is a really powerful tool. It looks like kind of like a Mentos or something. So this is a really powerful tool, prefab objects, to save time by creating building blocks in which we then assemble worlds and levels. And the final thing that we're going to want to do from our little Mentos experiment is we're going to want to upload all of our stuff. And we can see here prefabs, capsule.prefab, so it's adding that. So adding my initial scene and creating a capsule prefab. Commit to master and push. And there shouldn't be any errors. It should go through, go up onto the server, and we should be able to see it. If you're hitting push and something's going wrong, this is the part where Git LFS may not have been set up correctly. So double check that, all right? And we can just double check, initialize project. Oh, look, adding my initial scene. If you noticed, the logs, packages, and project settings haven't been changed at all because there's nothing to change yet. The only thing that Unity puts is the prefabs folder. So that's about it. I will see you in class.